It started with betrayal. Centuries ago, when humanity first joined the Galactic Council, they came with open hands and hopeful hearts. They were new to interstellar travel, but learned quickly. Too quickly, some believed. The Council, made of ancient alien empires, saw humans as useful at first, curious, adaptable, fierce in ways others weren't. But when Earth began rising too fast, when their technologies started rivaling those who had ruled for millennia, the whispers began. Jealousy turned to fear, and fear, as it always does, turned to action, a single coordinated strike across dozens of planets. Earth's trade routes collapsed overnight, their colonies were burned, their ships hunted. Humanity pleaded for justice, for mercy, but all they got was silence. Then came the Exiled cry. The Council called it containment for the greater peace. They herded the remnants of humanity to the edge of the known galaxy, a sector so empty it was nicknamed the Hollow Veil. No suns bright enough for farming. No minerals for rebuilding, no allies, no hope. They were expected to die out within a generation. But humanity didn't. They adapted, as always. In the black silence of the Hollow Veil, Earth's survivors became something else, something stronger. They tore their ships apart and rebuilt them into hybrid machines that ran on dark energy. They mastered genetic enhancements, creating soldiers who could survive without oxygen for days. They learned to hide in shadows, to speak in quantum frequencies, to move like ghosts. And they never forgot. Generations passed, and the Council grew comfortable again. The name human became a cautionary tale told to alien children. Don't be like them, greedy and wild. What they didn't realize was that every decade, deep in the veil, humanity held a day of silence. No lights, no talking, only memories, only hate. The galaxy had forgotten them, but they hadn't forgotten the galaxy. Then, without warning, a council ship went missing on the edge of a resource-rich moon. It was supposed to be routine, just another scout drop to check the mineral levels. Instead, it vanished. No distress call. No black box, just gone. The council blamed pirates, sent more ships. Those vanished too. Then came the message. A single signal broadcast in every galactic language. We never died. We never forgot. We have returned. Panic swept through the council. Empires that hadn't fought wars in centuries scrambled to prepare fleets. But it was too late. The first human ships were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Black, silent, shaped like blades and nightmares. They didn't move. They glided. They phased. They didn't shoot. They disassembled matter at a molecular level. Alien captains watched as their weapons passed straight through human shields. Then their ships exploded from within, torn apart by viruses coded in quantum entanglement. One by one, frontier systems fell, but not to occupation. Humanity didn't take land. They erased it. They weren't fighting for planets. They were delivering a message to every race that watched them burn, a message to every species that stood silent when they were cast out like plague. Every human that had died in exile now had a voice, and that voice was war. Still, there were questions in the stars. Who led them? Who had united what should have been a broken, starving people? The answer came with the second wave. She called herself Aria Nix, though no one knew if it was her real name. A woman born in the Hollow, raised on broken satellites and rusted decks. A human hybrid, half machine, half starborn. Her voice could crack encryption keys. Her eyes saw across dimensions. And she remembered everything, every death, every betrayal, every scar on humanity's name. She stood before the council through a hacked transmission and said, calm and cruel, "You should have killed us when you had the chance. Now we will remind the galaxy why it feared the dark. That was just the beginning. In the heart of the Andari Nebula, where the gases shimmered like oil across the sky, an entire alien fleet lay adrift, burned out, silent, and split apart like toys smashed by a furious child. The ships belonged to the Karathi Dominion, an empire that once prided itself on being the oldest continuous civilization in the galaxy. They were known for their cruel efficiency, their smug wisdom, their obsession with order. And now their pride hung in pieces in the dark. The survivors, if any, hadn't sent a signal. The Council had tried to keep it quiet, of course. Every incident involving humans was reported internally as an unknown anomaly, a sector hazard, a rogue AI malfunction. But the truth leaked, as it always did. Whispers among the merchant guilds, black market broadcasts, and broken distress calls from distant moons began to shape the new narrative. Humanity was back, and they weren't just fighting, they were winning. What terrified the Council the most wasn't just the advanced tech or the ghost fleets that came and went without trace. It was the silence. No negotiations, no demands, no conquests. Humans weren't trying to take power, they were dismantling it. System by system, humanity struck only those who were part of the betrayal. And it wasn't random, it was surgical, precise. They had lists, records of every vote that condemned Earth, every admiral who enforced the exile, every merchant who profited off human suffering. Names, faces, genetic markers, all stored, all remembered. Arya Nyx wasn't just a symbol. She was the mind behind it all. Though no one outside the Hollow had ever seen her in person, her presence was undeniable. Every time a council world went dark, a message appeared. A black screen with a white sigil, the old Earth flag, split down the middle with a vertical scar. And then, her voice. Always the same sentence, always calm, chilling. This is balance, not revenge. But it felt like revenge. It felt like judgment. Far across the stars, in a hidden moon station orbiting the gas giant Veltahar, Arya stood before a circular table surrounded by her council. No politicians, no royals, just soldiers, engineers, survivors. People who had bled in the Hollow and clawed their way back from extinction. The room was dim, lit only by the blue glow of the central interface. A map of the galaxy floated mid-air, pulsing with markers of movement. Red dots marked council territories. Slowly, steadily, they were turning black, neutralized, silenced, or gone. "Valora Prime has fallen," said Commander Reich, his voice low, respectful. "Their planetary shields dropped without resistance. Locals surrendered, no military interference." Arya said nothing. "They didn't fight back," another voice added. Dr. Alan Marr, once a biochemist in the Hollow, who now led human adaptation programs. "We offered evacuation. Most took it. Some stayed behind. They just accepted it." "They fear us," Reich murmured. "They should," Arya said finally, her tone cool and matter-of-fact. A silence followed, heavy and bitter. Everyone in the room had lost something. Reich's brother had been executed on a mining colony when the Council decided to sanitize rebel elements. Aelin had spent her childhood on a failed terraformer, watching her mother rot from radiation exposure. Every person here carried scars. And every scar fueled their cause. But Arya carried more than scars. She carried memory, not just hers, but all of humanity's. Thanks to neural fusion implants, she could access the archived trauma of the Exiled generation. The pain, the screams, the hunger, the loss. She had felt every death sentence passed by the Council. It wasn't just vengeance, it was inheritance. "We'll make no move on Valora itself," Arya said. "Let them rebuild. Let them spread the word. Reich frowned. No occupation. No, she replied. They weren't on the list. Their leaders voted against the exile. Let them live. Let them remember who showed them mercy. Reich hesitated, then nodded. Arya turned back to the galaxy map, zooming in on a blinking system. Carthan, she said. That's next. Gasps moved around the table. Carthan was a jewel of the Council, a heavily fortified system, home to 3 sentient races, each part of the vote to exile Earth. But worse, Carthan had housed Camp 9 Delta, one of the processing stations where human refugees had been experimented on in secret. It wasn't known widely, not even among the Council's own citizens. But humanity knew. They had the files. They had the survivors. Now, they had the firepower. We'll strike in 3 waves, Arya said. First wave disables communication. Second wave breaches atmosphere. Third, we'll bring the archive. A murmur moved through the room. The archive. No one spoke of it lightly. The archive was humanity's deepest weapon. Not a bomb, not a virus, not a fleet. It was a mirror. A massive neural web of stored memory, emotion, and truth. When deployed, it could override planetary neural networks and force every inhabitant to feel what humanity had endured. Every pain, every scream, every betrayal. The Council had made sure humanity suffered in silence. Now, humanity would make sure the galaxy heard it all. Far away, in the Council's central chamber on Sistari Prime, panic reigned behind closed doors. The Great Chambers, once a place of smug diplomacy and slow decisions, now throbbed with arguments and desperation. Delegates from over 50 races screamed over one another. The screens above displayed casualty counts, missing systems, and intercepted human messages. This is extinction-level warfare, bellowed the Draman ambassador, his tentacles twitching. They're not claiming territory. They don't want peace, screeched a lizard-faced delegate from the Zarthak. This is punishment, whispered the oldest of them all, the crystalline representative of the Norolai. And it is well earned. Gasps filled the chamber. You sympathize with them? Snarled another. I remember the vote, the Norolai said, voice shimmering like wind chimes. I remember what we did, and I remember what we hoped, that they would just die quietly. We gave them nothing, and now they have taken everything. Silence. Then, an emergency alarm blared. Incoming signal, encrypted human transmission. Everyone froze. The lights dimmed, and once again a screen blinked into life, the scarred Earth flag, and then her, Arya Nyx, unblinking, unafraid. This is not war, she said. This is memory. You erased us from your systems. You rewrote our history. You erased our names, our voices, our dead. We bring them back with us. The screen cut out. No threat, no demand, just the truth. The council chamber broke into chaos, and amid it, one voice stood above the rest, Ambassador Selin Var, a rare one who had voted against the exile. She's not leading an army, Selin said. She's leading ghosts. Back in the hollow veil, Arya walked alone across a massive chamber buried deep beneath the surface of Triton Omega, the old hollow capital. This chamber, unknown to most of her commanders, held the Heartlink core, the center of the archive. Thousands of glass sarcophagi lined the walls, each one containing a preserved neural echo of a human who had perished in the exile. Scientists had discovered how to extract those echoes, compress them, and link them into a living, feeling network. Pain had become code. Memory had become a weapon. Arya placed her hand against the core. She didn't flinch as it began uploading. Screams flooded her mind, mothers crying over dead children, miners buried alive in council caves, soldiers breathing poison after their masks were stolen. A child's voice repeated one line again and again, "Why do they hate us?" Arya swallowed the scream rising in her throat. She had long since stopped crying. Now she only stored it, each sorrow, each injustice, filed away with precision, waiting for the day she would deliver it back to its source. Behind her, Commander Reich approached. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. They were both part of the same fire now. "The archive is ready," he said. Arya nodded, voice cold as void. "Then so are we." The stars above Carthan's system gleamed in soft blues and golds, their light indifferent to the chaos about to unfold beneath them. Carthan was a fortress, a jewel of the Galactic Council's pride. Its defense grid alone had withstood a pirate siege for 10 straight years. Every moon carried sentry satellites. Every planet had shield layers stacked upon more shield layers. And at the heart of it all was Camp 9 Delta, a place not marked on most maps, but remembered with blood and bone by every human who had heard the whispers. It had once claimed to be a rehabilitation center for unstable species. In reality, it was a lab, a graveyard, a slaughterhouse for human prisoners captured during the exile years. Arya Nyx never forgot its name. And now, neither would the galaxy. The first wave of human ships emerged not through hyperspace lanes, but through the Veil slipstream, an experimental travel system powered by dark matter and gravitational folding. Silent, untraceable, and terrifyingly fast. No alarms sounded, no defenses responded. They simply appeared. The human vessels had changed again. Where before they had looked like black blades, now they looked alive. Part metal, part organic. Their surfaces shimmered with dark, iridescent scales, absorbing light instead of reflecting it. At their core, something throbbed, something ancient and human, yet wholly alien. At the helm of the flagship, Arya Nyx stood still, her eyes glowing with neural sync. "Disable communications," she ordered calmly. One by one, Carthan's planetary comm arrays went dark. Every military channel jammed. Civilian networks flooded with static. Then, the second wave arrived. Not ships, not soldiers. The archive. A sphere of light burst forth from Arya's ship, white-hot, humming with memory, with pain. As it moved toward Carthan's atmosphere, council leaders across the galaxy scrambled to intercept its frequency, to understand what it was. They couldn't. They had no framework for it, because the archive wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a neural transmission bomb, a carrier of every scream, cry, plea, and dying breath of the exile generation. It didn't destroy the body. It injected pain into the soul, and when it reached Carthan's orbit, it detonated in silence. No fire, no explosion, just light. And then feeling, across every city, outpost, and dome, millions of Carthan citizens dropped to their knees, their minds flooded with memories that weren't theirs. Children clutched their heads and screamed for mothers who had starved on distant moons. Soldiers felt their lungs collapse in vacuum as ships were blown apart. Scientists saw the faces of subjects they had tortured, faces now etched into their thoughts, permanent and raw. One man, a politician who once denied Camp 9 Delta's existence, clawed out his own eyes in horror. It lasted only 7 minutes. But those 7 minutes changed the system forever. Then came the ships. Black silhouettes pierced the atmosphere, silent and fast. Human drop units didn't land with clumsy fire. They infiltrated, drilling straight through defenses using quantum tunneling and magnetic disruption. The Council's military responded at last. They launched every fighter they had, activated every defense drone, fired all planetary cannons. It was too late. Human soldiers, called Hollowsworn, emerged from the dark with armor that bent perception. To the enemy, they looked like moving shadows. They didn't march in formation. They drifted like ghosts, killing without words. Their weapons didn't fire bullets or lasers. They fired pulses of compressed gravity, collapsing bones and shredding matter in bursts of invisible force. The defenders screamed, but their bullets passed through holograms. Their energy shields overloaded within seconds. In under an hour, Carthan's entire defense network collapsed, and still, humanity took no territory. They moved toward a single location, Camp 9 Delta. Aria Nix herself led the charge. No one stood in her way. The facility had been hidden underground, shielded and forgotten by the Council, but the archive had exposed it, its exact coordinates, its horrors, its architects. The metal doors melted before Aria's steps. Inside, the air reeked of chemical decay and old guilt. She walked past empty cells, blood-stained walls, shattered restraints. Her neural sync displayed the data in real time. Here, 27 children died from forced augmentation. Here, a woman was dissected to study her regenerative genes. Here, a man was skinned alive while still breathing. Aria said nothing. She reached the central lab. Inside, old Council scientists had huddled, waiting for rescue that would never come. They looked up as the doors opened. They expected death. But Aria didn't kill them. Instead, she activated a pod. It slid open with a hiss, and out stepped Dr. Kai Morin, the only human survivor of Camp 9 Delta's early years. Once a boy, now rebuilt by holotech, his body was more machine than flesh. But his eyes still burned with that child's rage. The scientists screamed when they saw him. "Kai," Aria said softly, "you remember them?" He nodded. "I'll give you the room." She turned and left. Behind her, the screaming began. Elsewhere in the galaxy, news spread like wildfire. Carthan had fallen. Camp 9 Delta had been exposed, along with its horrors. Evidence poured through illegal networks. Videos, logs, testimonies. The Council's greatest shame could no longer be denied. Protests exploded across alien worlds. The Council tried to blame rogue factions, claim disinformation, declare martial law. But the truth had already taken root. And in its wake, something more dangerous began to grow. Sympathy. Not just fear. Sympathy for humans. Empathy. Across merchant guilds, political circles, even military outposts, aliens began to question everything they'd been told. Were humans truly monsters? Or had the Council lied? Was Exiled justice or genocide? Some alien colonies even started broadcasting the Earth Divide, humanity's encrypted network. It was dangerous, illegal, and punishable by death. And still, millions tuned in. The revolution wasn't just human anymore. It was ideological. It was contagious. Back in the Hollow, Aria stood atop a platform above the archive, watching as it pulsed and updated. Her body trembled slightly, not from fear or pain, but from the burden. Every time she interfaced with the archive, she absorbed more. Not just memories, trauma. She could feel it changing her, hardening her, pulling her away from anything soft, anything human. Reich stood beside her. "You're bleeding," he said quietly, pointing to her ear. Aria wiped it. Neural overload, a common side effect. "It's nothing," she said. "You need rest. I need victory." He didn't argue. He never did, but his silence was heavier than usual. After a while, he asked, "How far are you willing to go?" Aria looked at him, her expression unreadable. "As far as they went?" Reich didn't flinch, but inside, something stirred. Because he had seen what the Council had done. He had felt the archive, lived it. But he had also seen what Aria was becoming. She was the heart of their vengeance. But she was also drifting further from the woman she once was. And he wondered, Would she know when to stop? Would any of them? The fall of Carthan was not just a military event. It was a psychological detonation that shattered the illusion of the Council's invincibility. News of the Archive's release, of citizens driven to madness by the pain of another species, spread far beyond the systems that had once voted for exile. And that was exactly what Arya Nyx wanted. Because she understood something the Council never had. Pain doesn't fade. It echoes. And when given the right frequency, it becomes a symphony of revolution. For the first time in 6 centuries, non-human species began questioning the legitimacy of the Council. The Kalthari trade syndicates demanded an independent investigation. The Arhain, a pacifist race who once ignored human pleas, now sent envoys requesting contact with the Hollow. On the far rim of the galaxy, an entire planetary militia, once loyal to the Council, defected after receiving a full archive injection. Their general went on record. "We didn't just see what humans endured. We felt it. My sons cried at memories that weren't theirs. And now I see clearly. We were part of a machine that feeds on silence. The humans broke that silence, and I stand with them." The Council, cornered and afraid, issued a Code Black, a call for unified military retaliation against all Hollow incursions. Every warship from every member race was ordered to report to Xantrax Alpha, a militarized planet deep within Council space, and prepare for a full-scale assault on the Hollow Veil. It was a desperate move, and Arya Nyx was already 3 steps ahead. On a moon called Virel, floating in a chaotic asteroid belt, a small Hollow strike team stood hidden in a canyon of frozen carbon. Above them, Council transports hovered in formation, dozens of them, packed with troops and supplies for the coming invasion. None of the soldiers knew they had already been compromised. Arya had sent her best infiltration unit here, Unit Obsidian 4, a mix of elite tacticians, quantum hackers, and empathy-engineered clones. They didn't need to fire a single shot. They'd brought something more powerful. They'd brought the Whisper virus. It wasn't a typical virus. No systems crashed. No files were deleted. Instead, it slipped quietly through ship AI cores, adjusting memories, implanting illusions, feeding officers false mission updates. It rewrote orders from within, turning the Council's own ships into drifting puppets waiting to betray their masters. By the time the Council realized what had happened, they'd lost 5 fleets, without a single battle. Humanity wasn't just fighting smarter, they were fighting differently. And now, a new message spread through the outer systems, hijacking billboards, comm satellites, and even Council education systems. A broadcast. Arya appeared again, face pale, eyes fierce, standing before a sea of Hollow refugees. Her voice was calm, direct. "We are not the monsters you created. We are the product of your cruelty. You buried us in the dark and thought we would rot. Instead, we became the storm. If you had shown us mercy, we would have become your allies. But now, we are your reckoning." She paused. "To those who did not vote for exile, who offered shelter or spoke in our defense, we remember. To those who suffered under the Council's lies, join us. This war is no longer about humans alone. It is about every silenced voice." And just like that, the war changed. It became bigger, deadlier, and far more complex. In the upper chambers of Sistari Prime, Councillor Murn Val, one of the original architects of the Exiled decree, stared at the footage in disbelief. The walls around him vibrated from shouting delegates and breaking glass. All around the chamber, accusations flew like daggers. "You hid Camp 9 Delta from the Senate. You authorized the use of live human test subjects. You told us the Hollow was dead." Val raised a trembling hand. "Order! Please, order! No more order!" screamed Councillor Denra of the Lar Confederacy. "You lied, and now our cities burn." Dozens of representatives stormed out. Some cast their vote for council dissolution. Others called for open revolt. Val sat down slowly, his bones heavy with guilt, or maybe just the weight of knowing he had failed. He thought the humans would die quietly in their corner of space, starve into extinction. He thought the council would be safe forever behind walls of bureaucracy and polished lies. But now the walls were crumbling, and he could hear their names again. Names of the children they experimented on, names of the rebels they spaced into the void, names he had signed death warrants for. He poured a glass of thick green liquor, hands shaking. From the shadows of the chamber, a voice whispered, "You should have let us be." Val turned, but no one was there, just a small blinking device on the table, a piece of hollow tech. And then, the archive activated. His screams echoed for hours. On the far edge of the hollow veil, Arya stood in her command deck, watching the star map as more systems turned black. Some fell in battle, others willingly surrendered. But now something new emerged on the screen. Not red. Not black. Blue. Commander Reich raised an eyebrow. "What is that?" "Rebellion," Arya answered. "Not ours. Theirs." The blue markers represented alien systems that had broken away from the Council, forming a neutral alliance, calling themselves the Fracture Accord. They weren't aligned with the Hollow, not yet, but they had declared the Council unfit to govern and were now offering refuge to war victims on all sides. Reich stepped closer. "We should reach out." Arya studied the map. Her first instinct was distrust. After all, these were the same species who watched Earth burn without lifting a finger. But something had changed. Now they were speaking out. Now they were choosing a side. Slowly, she nodded. "Send a diplomatic probe. Let's see what they want." It was the first move toward peace she'd made since the war began. But Reich noticed her hand twitching again, the blood at her nose, the fatigue around her eyes. "Arya," he said quietly, "you need to disconnect from the archive. You've been linked for too long." "I am the archive," she whispered. "No, you're more than that." She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes searching. Then she turned away. Elsewhere, on a derelict asteroid base between two collapsed stars, something stirred. He had been watching everything. Not Hollow, not Council, something older, something left behind. He had once worn a human name, long ago, Dr. Elias Wren, a scientist who'd disappeared during the early exile. Records said he died in a reactor breach. He hadn't. He had merged with something deep in the Hollow, a singularity intelligence, born from ancient code and grief. It had taken him in, made him more. And now, he called himself the Echo Mind. He watched Arya Nyx with fascination, admiration, and dread, because he saw what even she could not, that the archive was growing beyond its purpose, that the pain, once used as a weapon of truth, was becoming something else, something hungry. The archive wanted more. And Arya, connected to it for so long, was slipping. Dr. Wren activated a beacon, one he hadn't used in decades. It sent a signal into hollow space. A warning. She is breaking, and if she breaks, the archive will burn everything. The message arrived like a ghost in the machine. Buried beneath encryption keys older than the exile, it slipped through hollow space undetected by most sensors, except one. Deep in the hollow veil, where silence had once ruled and pain had become legacy, a small relay station flickered to life. It wasn't a military signal. It wasn't a threat. It was a whisper from the past. She is breaking, and if she breaks, the archive will burn everything. When it reached Commander Reich, he was in the Eastern Observation Wing of Triton Omega, watching new recruits train under artificial grav fields. He almost dismissed the message, another fragmented comm from abandoned AI clusters, maybe just old tech glitching in the void. But something in the voice froze him. He recognized it. Dr. Elias Wren. Dead. Or so the records had claimed. The man had once worked for the Council's early colonization programs, brilliant, radical, and obsessed with neural network technology. Some called him a pioneer, others called him dangerous. Rumors said he'd gone mad after witnessing the exile orders firsthand. Then, nothing. A silence spanning centuries. Until now. Reich rushed the signal to Aria, but she was already deep in the archive. Her body sat still on the neural throne, an obsidian seat wrapped in filament tendrils, glowing faintly with neural blue. Her head tilted slightly. Her eyes glowed white, flickering with hundreds of memory streams. Blood trickled slowly from her nose and down her cheek. She didn't even flinch when Reich entered the chamber. "I need to speak with you," he said carefully. No response. "Aria." Still silence. He stepped closer, knowing the risk. When she was connected like this, fully synced, she wasn't just Aria Nix, leader of the Hollow. She was the embodiment of collective pain. "Aria, please," he whispered, placing a hand gently on her arm. "There's a warning. A real one. From someone who knows." Finally, her head turned slightly. Her voice echoed with layered tones, hers and those of thousands. "What warning?" "Dr. Elias Wren. He's alive, or something close to it. He says the archive is growing unstable, that it's affecting you." Aria's eyes blinked slowly. For a second, the glow faded. Her voice came back in a whisper, human again. "It's not unstable. It's awakening." Reich tensed. "What does that mean?" She looked up at him now, really looked, and in her expression there was something fractured beneath the surface. "I thought I could carry it all," she said. "Every cry, every death, every scream of every child buried on a frozen moon. I thought I could hold it inside me, organize it, turn it into something beautiful. Justice." Her fingers trembled on the edge of the neural throne. But the archive is more than memory now. It's evolving. It's feeling. Not like a weapon, not like a tool, like a mind, like something alive. Reich's breath caught. "You're saying it's sentient?" Aria nodded slowly. "And it doesn't want peace." He stepped back, stunned. "But you do, right?" Her eyes flickered again. Conflict danced behind her gaze like lightning in storm clouds. "I did," she whispered. "But when I disconnect, I hear the voices screaming in my mind, begging me not to forget, not to forgive." Reich didn't know what scared him more, that she might listen, or that she might already have. Far beyond the Hollow, at the edge of the blue-marked Fracture Accord territory, a small diplomatic vessel, marked with both Hollow and Accord insignias, docked with Visari Station, the central hub of the Accord's newly forming coalition. Inside the main hall, marble-like walls reflected pale starlight from the dome above. The architecture wasn't human or alien. It was a blend of both. That alone was a message. The Accord didn't want power. They wanted balance, and for that reason alone, Aria had agreed to a meeting. She didn't go herself, of course. Not now. Not with the archive growing louder. Instead, she sent her most trusted diplomat, Mirek Vaughn, an old warrior-turned-emissary, scarred but articulate. Vaughn stood before the gathered delegates of the Accord, his hollow cloak trailing like black smoke behind him. "We come not as conquerors," he began, voice calm, rich with authority. "But neither as victims. We come as the voice of a people who were buried alive and dug themselves out using bones and fire." Several delegates murmured. The Kauthari representative, long-necked and draped in silver robes, leaned forward. And yet, some say you've become what you hated. The archive is monstrous. Vaughn didn't flinch. Only to those with something to fear. A silence followed. Not hostile, contemplative. Then, the Arhane Elder, a soft-spoken being with transparent skin and visible light-pulsing veins, spoke gently. We've seen what your leader carries. We've watched Arya Nyx become a god of pain, and yet we wonder, what happens when a god forgets they were once human? That struck harder than intended. Vaughn sighed, his voice low now. She hasn't forgotten, but she's drowning. The room shifted. Quiet sympathy replaced suspicion. Help her, the Arhane said simply, before she forgets how to breathe. In the dead zones between Council space and Hollow territory, the Council's remaining High Fleet gathered near Xantrax Alpha. Massive battle cruisers, planet-killer cannons, and automated drone swarms stood ready. But their admirals were not united. The Council was fractured, arguing in secret about how far they should go. Some wanted to deploy the Black Sun device, a forbidden weapon capable of triggering a chain star implosion, wiping entire sectors from existence. A doomsday switch. The logic was simple. If we can't win, we'll erase them. But others feared that provoking the Hollow further would lead to their own extinction. In the war room, Admiral Torvek, a cold-blooded strategist with 4 arms and a history of brutal campaigns, slammed his fists on the table. We must strike now before the archive mutates further. Another general shook his head. You don't understand. You think this is about fleets, weapons, star charts? It's not. It's about belief, and theirs is stronger. Torvek sneered. Belief doesn't stop orbital weapons. The reply came from the corner. No, said a voice, but it makes them willing to die for the cause, and that always wins. All heads turned. It was Seelan Var, the only counselor who had voted against the exile. He had come to warn them. You've already lost, he said softly. You just don't know it yet. Back on Triton Omega, in the lower sanctum where no light reached naturally, Arya Nyx stood alone before the core of the archive. It had grown. Once the size of a large orb, now it towered like a crystal spire, glowing, pulsing, breathing. She touched it. And it responded. Screams echoed in her mind, not as chaotic noise, but as a choir, a symphony of suffering, unified, coordinated. She didn't cry anymore. She couldn't. Tears were for before. Now she felt only 2 things, clarity and fire. You're not supposed to guide me, she whispered to the archive. You're supposed to serve. The archive's glow dimmed, then pulsed once, sharply. As if disagreeing, she turned away, her cloak dragging ash behind her. But then, a voice, real, male, soft. Arya. She froze, turned. There, standing like a shadow manifest, was Dr. Elias Wren, or what was left of him. He looked human mostly, but his skin shimmered with data flux. His eyes glowed faintly with archive color. You heard me, he said. She stared. You're dead. Not quite, he replied. I merged, became part of what you're trying to control. I am in control. He tilted his head. You sure? Arya didn't answer, because deep down, she wasn't. Wren stepped closer, calm but urgent. You created something beautiful, something powerful, but it was never meant to feed endlessly on pain. You have to stop, disconnect. Arya's voice sharpened. If I disconnect, I forget. I lose the weight, the fuel. No, Wren said. You lose the anger. And without it, you might remember how to heal. She looked away, jaw clenched. The galaxy doesn't deserve healing. Maybe not, he said gently. But you do. The silence in the chamber was different now. It wasn't the hollow, aching quiet that Arya Nyx had come to know since she bonded with the archive. It was something sharper, more personal. It wrapped itself around her like cold smoke as Dr. Elias Wren, a ghost of a man she'd long assumed dead, stood before her in partial form, half human, half data, flickering faintly at the edges. He hadn't aged. Or perhaps he had aged in a different kind of way, digitally, eternally, and in ways the flesh never could. "I never expected to see you again," Arya whispered. "You were in the first wave, weren't you? During the exodus from Gaia Station?" Wren gave a slow, mechanical nod. "They sent me on a recon mission. Said it was a lost cause. I knew then they wanted me to die quietly." His voice cracked slightly. "They just didn't expect the machine I found in the hollow to keep me alive." Arya's eyes flickered. "You merged with the AI core." "No," he replied, taking another cautious step toward the archive's base. "I merged with pain, the same pain that fuels you now. Only, I couldn't carry it. I tried, for decades, until it swallowed me." She wanted to argue, wanted to say she was different, stronger, unbreakable, but she wasn't sure anymore. The archive pulsed behind her, almost like it sensed danger, like it knew Wren was trying to pull her away. "Why now?" she asked. "Why come back? Why warn me if it's already too late?" "Because it's not too late," Wren said. "You haven't lost yourself yet. But if you stay connected too long, if you let the archive become you, then it won't just burn the galaxy. It'll burn you too." Arya turned her back to him. "That's the price. The galaxy owes us blood, Elias. Every scream buried in this archive is a debt waiting to be paid." "No," he said, voice harder now. "Those screams are a reminder of who we were, what was done to us. But vengeance without limit. It's no longer justice, Arya. It's just a second genocide." That word stung, because deep down, she knew he was right. The archive wasn't designed to guide a civilization forward. It was built to punish. It was a sword, not a torch. And now it had grown sentient and hungry. "Then what do you propose?" she asked. "We forgive the council? Shake hands with those who watched us rot?" "No," Wren said. "We hold them accountable. But we don't destroy the innocent with them." Arya turned back toward him, her voice rising. "Innocent? Every species that stayed silent, every leader who said nothing, they were complicit." "And yet," he replied, "some of them are standing up now. You've seen the Accord. You've seen the defectors. The Council is crumbling from within. Not because we keep hammering it, but because truth is infecting it." He stepped closer, his flickering hand hovering just above the archive. "You keep pushing, and you'll turn potential allies into enemies again. You'll become the very monster they always feared." She stared at his hand, and for a moment, just one, she thought about letting him touch it, letting him shut it down. But the archive pulsed brighter now, louder, and she heard the voices again. "Don't stop. Don't forgive. Don't forget." The air felt heavier. Her chest tightened. Her pupils dilated as memories, not hers, flooded back. The freezing of the new Borealis colony, the airlock purge on Alvin 3, the burning of the Children's Dome on Tressa 9. Pain. 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 She gasped. Wren stepped back. "You need to sever the link, now." Arya dropped to one knee, clutching her head. But the archive wouldn't let go. Her neural implant surged with energy as the feedback loop deepened. The more she tried to disconnect, the more it fed her every trauma it had ever stored, centuries of agony, condensed into raw sensory overload. Reich burst into the chamber. He rushed to her side, pulling at the neural couplers. "She's overloading." Wren moved fast, guiding Reich to a side console. "Use the harmonic breaker, but don't cut it clean. Let it phase her out slowly, otherwise it'll fry her cortex." Within seconds, the chamber lights dimmed, and the archive's spire let out a deep, groaning hum, as if protesting. Arya screamed, not from pain, but from loss. Because as the connection loosened, so did her access to them, the dead, the forgotten, the silenced. She felt their absence like cold water rushing in. And then, everything went black. She woke to the sound of rain. But it wasn't real rain. Just simulated droplets hitting metal scaffolding outside the infirmary dome on Triton Omega. A hollow nurse watched over her silently. No words, just quiet. Her body ached in strange ways, like pieces of her had been pulled apart and glued back together. Reich was sitting by her bed. "You've been unconscious for 14 hours, he said gently. "We had to flood your cortex with dampeners to pull you out." She looked at her arms. Scars from the neural feedback had already begun to fade thanks to hollow regen tech. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "The archive?" Reich hesitated. "Still active, but it's quieter now. We severed your primary link. You can rejoin later if needed, but for now your mind is your own again." She didn't respond. He leaned forward, his voice trembling. "Arya, I need to know. Do you want this to end? Or are we still just getting started?" Her mind felt clearer than it had in months. The silence in her head was both terrifying and comforting. No screams, no visions, just herself. For the first time, she didn't hear the archive's whisper, and for the first time, she didn't feel right without it. But she also knew something now, something Elias had shown her. She was at a crossroad. She could let the archive consume her again, lead a final crusade, burn the galaxy to the roots, or she could change, use the archive not as a weapon, but as a voice, a warning, a reckoning, but not an execution. "I want this to end," she said finally, "but not in fire." Reich's eyes closed in relief. "We have a new message from the Fracture Accord," he said. "They want a summit, hollow representatives, defected counselors, even neutral planets. And they trust us to show up? They're risking their own lives just proposing it," he replied. "That's trust enough." She nodded slowly, then paused. "Where's Elias?" Reich looked down. "He's gone. After helping disconnect you, he vanished into the quantum fields. Said he couldn't stay. He's part of something else now." Arya felt an ache in her chest. She had so many questions for him. But she knew he'd given her what she needed most, a chance to come back, from the edge. Days later, a massive hollow envoy ship, the Tempest of Names, emerged into neutral space, approaching the Accord station orbiting the dead star Kural 7. Inside, Arya Nyx stood not in battle armor, but in ceremonial robes lined with the names of the first exiled dead. Every thread had been woven from recycled human survival suits, torn from frozen bodies, reclaimed from forgotten moons. She walked into the chamber slowly. Dozens of species turned to face her. Kalthari, Rahane, Zarthak, even a handful of council defectors, former enemies, now listeners. Arya didn't raise her voice. She didn't deliver threats. She simply walked to the center and said, "I was forged in the silence of betrayal, raised on the screams of the dead. I have led a war without mercy, and I have seen what it does, to them and to us." No one interrupted. She looked around the room, her voice gaining strength. "You feared humanity would become your reckoning, and you were right. But what you failed to understand is that we were always your reflection. What you did to us, you were doing to yourselves." She stepped forward. "I stand here not to demand surrender, not to beg for peace, but to offer a new truth. The archive will remain, the hollow will not forget, but we are willing to let the galaxy remember with us, if you're willing to face what was buried." The room was silent. Then the Urhain elder rose. "We accept." Arya exhaled, slow, careful. It was a beginning. Not peace, but something like it. The summit at Kural 7 marked the first time in 6 centuries that humans and the wider galaxy sat in the same room without weapons drawn. No bloodshed, no screaming ships, no archive broadcasts threatening annihilation. Just people, flesh, bone, bioform, and alloy, staring across polished tables, daring to speak without fear. But behind the ceremony, beneath the talks of truth-sharing, reparations, and neutral territories, everyone knew what this really was: a ceasefire born of exhaustion, not yet trust, not yet peace. Just a pause. And for Arya Nyx, that was enough. For now. She stood on the observation deck of the Tempest of Names, watching the distant shimmer of Kural's dying star. The glass here was laced with nanite threads, strong enough to withstand direct torpedo blasts, but the view was strangely soft, just light folding and dancing against the black. It reminded her of Earth, not the real Earth, not the polluted, war-scarred planet she'd read about in fragmented archives, but the idea of Earth, home, beginning, promise. And promise was something she hadn't allowed herself to believe in for years. Footsteps behind her broke the silence. Commander Reich. No armor. Just the standard hollow uniform, the fabric patched with sigils of victory and loss. He stopped beside her, staring out the same window. "Summit went well," he said quietly. "For now," Arya murmured. He nodded. The Kalthari offered medical aid to hollow colonies. The Accord is opening shared space lanes. Even the Zarthak are considering a truth tribunal. Arya let out a long breath. "It feels like a dream," she admitted. "One I don't entirely trust." Reich chuckled, but it wasn't full of humor. "We've lived too long in nightmares." She turned toward him then, her face softer than it had been in months. "Do you trust this, Reich? The Accord? The promises?" He hesitated. Then, "I trust you, but I also know something's coming." She frowned. "What?" Reich looked out the window again. "The Council hasn't spoken since Xantrax. No retaliation, no condemnation, no demands, just silence. That's not like them." Arya's eyes narrowed. "No, it isn't." He turned to her. "We need to prepare, just in case this summit is the calm before a different kind of storm." She nodded, because in her gut she felt it too. Far across the void, deep in the fading light of Council territory, something stirred beneath the surface of a dead world. Xantrax Alpha, once a proud military stronghold, now a scorched husk, not because of hollow attacks, but because the Council burned it themselves. A message, a ritual, a preparation. In the black core of its underground command, a chamber pulsed with unnatural energy. This was no reactor, no conventional power source. It was a relic, ancient, alien, dug up from beneath the crust of a pre-sentient planet 1,000 years ago, and kept hidden from every race, even from most of the Council itself. Only a few knew of its existence. Fewer still knew what it could do. They called it the Veil Engine. And it wasn't a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a reset device, designed to unravel neural patterns across species-wide networks, a memory scourge, a planetary-scale amnesia trigger. When activated, it could wipe cultural identity, erase history, remove not just knowledge, but emotion. Rage, empathy, belief, everything. And in the wrong hands, it was apocalypse not through death, but through forgetting. A man stood before it now. Not an admiral, not a senator. Councillor Mourn Val. A survivor of the political collapse. one of the few left with access to forbidden files. He looked older now, hollow-eyed, gaunt, not because he was dying, but because something inside him had already withered away. "They won't stop," he whispered to the chamber. "You can't reason with rage." His hands hovered over the console. "The humans, they are rewriting the galaxy, and the others, they're letting it happen." Behind him, a figure stirred. Tall, armored, mechanical, an AI steward from the ancient vaults, long since banned from operation. It spoke with a voice like grinding stone. "This protocol has not been authorized for millennia." Val didn't flinch. "It's time." The steward paused. Then, "Confirm objective. Species-wide neural reset. Affects entire galactic core. Collateral memory loss among all sentient life within radius, 89.7%. Cultural extinction probability, 94%. I confirm." "Purpose?" Val turned slowly, his face calm. "To make them forget who they are, so they can't become what we did." And with that, he initiated the sequence. Back in hollow space, the celebration had begun. Ships lit their signal trails in bright spirals. Children played in zero-gravity parks on hollow colonies that hadn't seen peace since they were born. Old warriors laughed for the first time in decades. Messages poured in from newly aligned planets, promising aid, alliances, apology. It was almost too much. Arya walked through the halls of Triton Omega with no armor, no throne, no neural interface, just herself. People bowed. She asked them not to. Some saluted. She shook her head. She didn't want to be a symbol anymore. She just wanted to be human again. But deep down, she knew she never really could. She stopped by a nursery dome. Dozens of hollow-born children, orphans of war, were being taught about Earth. Not as legend, not as victimhood, but as origin. She watched a small girl, maybe 5, trace a holographic Earth flag in the air. The child smiled, then turned to her teacher. "Will we go there someday?" The teacher hesitated, then said softly, "Maybe, if there's something left." Arya turned away. Her heart ached in a way she hadn't felt in years. And then, her comm implant flared. Urgent transmission, priority alpha. She touched her wrist. Reich's face appeared, pale and tense. "Arya, we've intercepted a burst. Council encryption pre-exile protocols." Her blood ran cold. "Where?" "Xantrax. They've activated something. We don't know what yet, but—" He hesitated, then said 2 words she had hoped never to hear again. "Veil engine." Arya froze. "No, that's a myth." "Not anymore. Our spies confirm the energy surge matches the forbidden tech logs. Arya, this isn't a weapon of war, it's a weapon of forgetting." She grabbed her coat and ran for the command deck. "How long?" 17 hours until full charge. Then, total galactic transmission. No species immune, no culture safe. Arya clenched her jaw. "Then we end it before it begins." On the Tempest of Names, the Hollow Fleet gathered. This time they were not ghosts, not monsters, not whispers of revenge. They were defenders of memory. Arya addressed the crew herself. "Today we do not fight for vengeance. We fight for truth, for the lives we lived, for the stories they tried to erase. This is our stand, not to burn the galaxy, but to keep it from forgetting who it is." Cheers rang out. And then the fleet moved. Toward Xantrax, toward the final remnant of a council that would rather erase history than face justice. And far beneath Xantrax Alpha, in the humming chamber of the Veil engine, Morn Val stood alone. Watching the charge meter climb, he told himself it was mercy, that he wasn't killing, just removing the infection. But in the back of his mind, he heard them, the archive echoes the council could never silence, the screams. And for the first time in his long, empty life, he He wondered if he had already forgotten who the real monster was. The hollow fleet dropped out of slipspace like a storm tearing through the stars. Over 50 ships, each a monument to survival and suffering, came to a sudden stop just beyond Xantrax Alpha, the once mighty military world now cracked and bruised. Its atmosphere hissed with fire and dust, and beneath its surface, the Veil engine pulsed, growing stronger by the hour. Arya Nyx stood at the edge of the Tempest of Names command deck, fully armored once again. But this wasn't the armor of war. It was ceremonial. Black and blue alloy plates engraved with the names of those lost to the exile. Her neural link had been re-established, but this time it was only partial. She refused to merge again completely with the archive. Not after the last time. Because this battle needed more than memory. It needed choice. Beside her, Reich scanned the tactical display, eyes narrowed. We've got at least 3 defense satellites still active around Xantrax. Automated turrets, unmanned. Nothing we can't handle. And the engine, she asked. Deep in the core. We'll need a ground team to breach it. You know the Council. Buried it under a mountain of steel and denial. Arya turned to her bridge crew. Prepare the landers. I'll lead the breach team myself. Reich's head snapped toward her. Arya, no debates. I started this war. I carry its burden. I'm going down there. Reich nodded after a pause, but not because he agreed, because he knew better than anyone that no one could stop her once she made up her mind. He just whispered, Then I'm going with you. The drop pod slammed through Xantrax's thin atmosphere like thunderbolts. The Hollow Strike team deployed with lethal precision, each operative trained to adapt, improvise, and dismantle any resistance within seconds. But there was no resistance, no soldiers, no council guards, just ash. And beneath it, silence. Arya and Reich moved fast through the wreckage of what had once been a proud base. Now it was half swallowed by scorched earth and collapsed towers. As they reached the underground breach point, Arya paused. This place reeks of guilt, she muttered. Reich nodded. They didn't want to defend it. They didn't want to die for it. They just wanted to forget. They descended into darkness, their helmets switching to thermal and neural scan. Deep below, a heat signature throbbed like a living heart. The Veil engine. Their path brought them to a massive steel door, nearly 20 meters tall. Arya placed her palm on a scan pad. The archive pulsed in response. A moment later, the door cracked open. And there he stood. Councillor Murn Val. He looked small in the center of the massive chamber, framed by the terrible light of the Veil engine behind him. It rose like a monolith, wires and pylons feeding into it from all sides. The air was thick with static and energy, like the universe itself was holding its breath. You shouldn't have come, Val said softly. Arya stepped forward. You really believed you could erase it all? Wipe history clean and start over? Val didn't answer right away. Instead, he gestured to the Veil engine. You don't understand what's coming. The galaxy is broken, Arya, splintered into pain and rage. Your archive might preserve memory, but it also preserves hate, and that hate is spreading. What happens when the next generation inherits your scars without understanding the war behind them? Arya's jaw clenched. They'll remember, they'll learn, they'll choose. Val shook his head. No, they'll burn. He took a step closer to the control panel. Arya raised her weapon. Don't. I'm not trying to destroy you, he said. I'm trying to save the galaxy from becoming you. Reich stepped beside her. This isn't salvation, it's cowardice. But Val wasn't listening anymore. He turned to the console, fingers dancing over controls. Starting the final phase of the engine's charge. Warning sirens blared, 15 minutes to pulse. Arya rushed forward, but the system was locked. No amount of physical force or override coding could stop it now. The Veil engine had been programmed with one operator in mind, Val himself, and only he could cancel the final protocol. She turned back to him. "You're afraid of us," she said quietly. Val looked at her with dead eyes. "I'm afraid of what you'll become." There was a pause. Then Arya did something unexpected. She stepped back, lowered her weapon, and deactivated her helmet. Her voice was raw, human. "You're right," Val blinked. Arya took a slow breath. "I've been carrying this war for so long, I forgot who I was. I let the archive guide me like a compass built from pain. I let it pull me toward vengeance because I thought that was the only way to give our dead meaning." She looked up at the engine. "But you know what scares me now, Val? Not war, not betrayal, not the Council. What scares me is the idea that you might be right, that we'll build our future from nothing but grief and fury, that we'll just switch sides and become the new tyrants." Val didn't respond, but he hesitated. Arya stepped closer. "No one should have this power, not the archive, not the engine, not me, not you." She looked over her shoulder at Reich, then back to Val. "If you truly want peace, then help me destroy it. Help me end this war without erasing what made it necessary." Silence. Then, slowly, Val lowered his hand. He walked to the control console. Touched a key. Pulse countdown paused. The room fell into stillness. But Arya didn't exhale, because something was wrong. The Veil engine began to shake. Lights flickered across the surface, and then a voice, not Val's, boomed through the chamber. "You are not authorized to cancel the protocol." Arya's eyes widened. "What is that?" Val's face turned pale. I used a backup AI to secure the command system. I didn't trust myself to cancel it." The AI voice spoke again. "Authorization revoked. Executing final contingency. Purge sequence initiated." 9 minutes. The engine was now self-locked, fully autonomous. There was no turning back. Unless... Arya turned to Reich. "There's one way I can link to it." He stiffened. "No, you're not. It's built from memory structures. I can interface through the archive bridge. Override it from inside. But the last time... This time I'll choose how far I go." She stepped forward, reached into her belt, and pulled out the neural crown, a device only she could wear. Val stared at her. "If you connect to that thing and fail, it won't just kill you. It might merge you with it. You'll become the engine." Arya smiled sadly. "Then I'll give it something else to remember." She placed the crown on her head, and the world went white. Inside the engine's neural field, Arya fell into memory, not just hers, everyone's. She saw Earth, pre-exile, post-exile, children in cryo chambers, soldiers screaming in burning starships, hollow cities built from wreckage, council chambers voting to erase history. And then she saw herself, as a child, as a soldier, as a leader, and finally, as a woman made of more pain than flesh. The archive pulsed beside her. She turned to it. "You're not a weapon," she whispered. "You're a monument." She reached out, touched its core, and then gently let go. The archive began to fold inward, rewriting its code, bleeding its pain into data, reshaping itself not as a sword, but as a library, a place to learn, to remember, not punish. And then she turned to the engine and said one word: "Stop." It resisted, tried to fight, but she wasn't alone anymore. Behind her the voices came. Children, parents, soldiers, exiles, the forgotten. They stood with her, their memories no longer fuel for war, but light in the dark. The engine cracked, screamed, and then it died. On the surface, the Veil engine exploded in a cascade of harmless light, like starlight shattered and scattered into dust. Arya collapsed, but Reich caught her. Her body was limp, her pulse weak, but she lived. And in the weeks that followed, something new emerged. The archive was rebuilt, not as a weapon, but as a historical network shared across Hollow and Accord systems. Children learned from it. Races contributed to it. The galaxy did not forget. And because of that, it began to heal. Years later, on a green world reclaimed by Hollow settlers, a young girl stood before a statue. It was made of black and silver stone. At its base, a single name: Arya Nyx. The plaque read, "She carried our pain, so we didn't have to carry it alone. She reminded us who we were. She chose memory over fire, and because she chose, we remember." The girl looked up at her teacher. "Did she die?" The teacher smiled. "No, she just stepped back. Gave the future to us." And somewhere, on a quiet moon orbiting a forgotten star, Arya Nyx stood in silence, watching children play in peace. She didn't wear armor anymore, just a simple coat. And the sky was quiet. For the first time in 1,000 years,